Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Irma, representing Team B for this presentation. And the subject of my talk is the introduction of ASEAN education, and the presentation covers the topic of general information of ASEAN education, followed by system issues and challenges of ASEAN, and the last one is AQRF. After my talk, there will be a time for review. We're going to have a little quiz, so you better pay close attention to this presentation. Now let's move to the first part of my talk, which is about the comparative review of the current education system structure in ASEAN countries. All ASEAN countries have a legal provision for free and compulsory education for at least some levels of basic education. And as you see in this table, 633 or 6 years of primary school, 3 years of lower secondary school, and 3 years of upper secondary school is the most common in the region. Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand apply 633 education system. Laos, PDR, and Vietnam have 543 system. The Philippines and Singapore practice 642 system. Malaysia has 632, while Brunei Darussalam has 65 system. And Myanmar has replaced 542 system to 642 system. And now let's turn to the next issue, which is the accreditation for completion of lower and upper secondary education. Concerning with the accreditation for completion of lower and upper secondary education, students in all ASEAN countries receive either a diploma or a certificate upon meeting the requirements for completing upper secondary education. By contrast, only students in Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, and Malaysia receive a diploma or certificate upon completion of lower secondary education. The rest of the countries do not get any accreditation for completing lower secondary education. Now I'd like to move on to the alternative education. Many Asian countries have promoted alternative education and the use of equivalency programs. However, the ways alternative learning programs are organized, delivered, and certified are different. We will further see the alternative education pathways in ASEAN countries in the next slide. Alright, in order to extend education to all children, many countries in the ASEAN group have made attempts to improve and expand the alternative education system. Alternative education system itself has been recognized as an important step in providing access to education for all. And this graph shows you that various types of alternative education exist in the ASEAN countries, including equivalency programs or EPS and community learning centers or CLCS. From the chart or the graph, we can see that Cambodia practices accelerated learning programs as an alternative education system, and the duration is 3 years. The core subjects are from national curriculum, and the certificate is not available. Indonesia practices Packet A as an alternative education system, and the duration is 2 years. The core subjects are moral building and academically oriented subjects, also life skills oriented subjects, and the certificate is examination certificate issued by the government. Myanmar practices non-formal education as an alternative education system, and the duration is 2 years. The core subjects are Burmese, English, mathematics, and general studies. The certificate is assess attendance and achievement tests. Certificate issued by MOE. The Philippines practices alternative learning system or ALS. as an alternative education system, and the duration is 8 months or 800 hours. And the core subjects are communication skills, problem solving, and critical thinking, sustainable use of resources, productivity, development of self and a sense of community, and expanding one's world vision. The certificate is called National Accreditation. There is also a program called TVET, or Technical and Vocational Education and Training. And in this case, trends in TVET enrollment rates vary across in the region, but in most countries, the share of TVET has tended to decrease over the past decade. ASEAN countries have different requirements determining admissions to TVET schools. In major countries, students are required to complete lower secondary schooling before enrolling in technical or vocational programs, and a smaller number of countries allow students to enroll the technical or vocational programs directly after completing primary school. Now we come to the challenges ASEAN countries face in terms of education. As some of us probably have known, the common policy among 10 ASEAN countries is to promote quality or equity in education. It means to provide equal access to high quality education to all. However, there are many constraints or barriers to get this quality education and learning opportunity to all. The basic challenge is to cover rapid expansion, or the scale of provision, or quantity of students and graduates, and to improve the quality of providing education. Like what you can see in the background, there is a big gap between these two schools. Both are elementary schools in Indonesia. One is located in the outskirt area and one is in the city center. And we can see here how different the facilities are. This leads me to our next point, which is problem of quality education. Among ASEAN countries, there has been lack of learning facilities such as textbooks, libraries, laboratories, and other learning materials, especially in Cambodia, Laos PDR, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Indonesia. In those countries, not all schools and classrooms in education institutions are conducive to promote excellence in learning. There are also problems in equity education. When we think about equity in education, there are many problems we face, especially in schools of rural and urban areas in Indonesia case, in gender inequity in Vietnam, and public-private institutions in many ASEAN countries. Also, there is not enough school building and inadequate facilities in classrooms of ASEAN countries, except for Brunei Darussalam and Singapore. In Thailand and Indonesia, there are shortages of teachers in remote areas. In Laos PDR, some schools have large class sizes, and generally schools in many ASEAN countries have lack of textbook and learning materials. Another equity problem is geographical location of the school, because most schools are in rural area and the transportation there are not adequate. Moreover, students and parents' low appreciation toward education and socio-economic condition of the family are also the problem we consider about equity in education. In addition to this, according to data, 1/3 of population of Southeast Asia are poor. Therefore, it is not easy for arranging school budget to have more buildings and classrooms and learning facilities. Not only those, we also experience some major problems in higher education system. The challenges are inadequate qualified faculty staff and no academic community, less experience in quality assurance process, lack of equitable access, infrastructure, diversity of universities, facilities for the use of English language, and limited research expertise. Still related to the challenges, UNESCO made a comparative analysis of selected educational issues in ASEAN countries. And it states that in order to strengthen education system in the region, we need clear vision and commitment for the implementation of a better system. We also need to maintain the consistency of our policies, focus on equity, quality, and relevance, create strong policy for diverse learning needs, create stronger partnerships or cooperations, and defining standard and measuring the outcomes with those standards. From the education challenges, now we move on to the framework called AQRF. If European Union, the most successful multilateral organization, has EQF or the European Qualifications Framework, which acts as a translation device to make national qualifications more readable across Europe and promoting workers and learners' mobility between countries and facilitating their lifelong learning. ASEAN has ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework or AQRF. It is a common reference framework that enables comparisons of education qualifications across participating ASEAN members states, or we call it AMS. In this graph here, we can see the objectives of AQRF, which is to support recognition of qualifications, encourage the development of qualifications frameworks that can facilitate lifelong learning, encourage the development of national approaches to validating learning gained outside formal education, promote and encourage education and learner mobility, support worker mobility, improve understanding of qualification systems, and the last one is to promote higher quality qualification system. Now, in this chart, we can see the AQRF referencing patterns. Referencing here is a process that establishes the relationship between the 8-level AQRF and NQF or qualification system of participating AMS. And the number of levels of an NQF may differ, and typically between 8 and 9 levels. And AQRF itself would therefore improve the understanding of the qualification of each level of an NQF. AQRF also works as an information tool to facilitate the recognition of qualifications and does not replace the decision-making process of the competent authorities in each AMS. Now we've come to the point of how AQRF supports NQF. With some AMS having established comprehensive NQF, others with sectoral frameworks, and some do not yet have any, AQRF aimed to support and enhance AMS, NQF, and NQS by offering a mechanism to facilitate comparison, transparency, and higher quality qualification systems. However, currently only 4 countries join AQRF. They are Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia. And it is expected that soon the rest of ASEAN member countries will join AQRF. Well, we've covered the points that my group needed to present today, and to sum up, in order to improve the education system in ASEAN countries, there are several actions we need to take. That is to strengthen and build on existing frameworks and mechanisms, create new partnerships, especially with the private sector, maximize efforts and aim for synergy, and to support implementation of the new education agenda at the global, ASEAN, and the national levels. And these are our references. Thank you for listening.